Hello everyone, greetings from National Skills Network, popularly known as NSN. Today we have a guest with us who's going to tell us more about apprenticeships and apprenticeships from the perspective of NSDC. Let's meet Mr. Jan Eben, who's Senior Head, Apprenticeships Division, National Skill Development Corporation, that's NSDC. Welcome to this chat, Mr. Jan. And it would be great to learn from you more about apprenticeships in general in India, as well as a National Apprenticeship Promotion Scheme and the role of NSDC, and your wisdom and your contribution to strengthen the base of apprenticeships in India. So let's go ahead and understand from you more about your stay in India and how you're advising our industry, our government, and various stakeholders, and what are the challenges you foresee in implementing apprenticeships in India?
Thank you, Madhuri, and it's great to be with you, and it's great to be here. Now, let me explain that in NSDC, the Apprenticeship Division looks after apprenticeship training and the National Apprenticeship Promotion Scheme. But NAPS is only one aspect of this work, and it is broader. It is about apprenticeship and the promotion of apprenticeship and the engagement of industries to take in apprentices, and NAPS is just one aspect of this. Apprenticeship training is learning an occupation on the job and in the workplace and under the direction of a trainer or a mentor, and this leads to a recognized qualification. Yeah. And I emphasize this because often in my conversation with stakeholders and people in the skills ecosystem, there seems to be a little bit of a confusion. What is the difference between an apprenticeship and an internship? Which is why I'm taking care right now to emphasize the formal learning. Yeah. Of an occupation and the gaining of a formal and a recognized qualification. And then in India, there is a peculiarity, namely the distinction between optional trades and designated trades. And this always needs some explanation, and it was also a bit difficult for me in the beginning to understand what this exactly meant. Right. But it means the difference between designated trades, which are regulated and subject to standards and that are passed by the central government, whereas the optional trades are apprenticeship courses that are self-designed by the industries and which allow, because of that, a greater degree of flexibility. But yet these apprenticeships also fall under the Apprentices Act of 1961, and there's a need to register them, and there's a need to link them to the NSQF, National Skill Qualification Framework. Yeah. If the establishments that run these want to have some of their cost reimbursed under NAPS. And NAPS then is the National Apprenticeship Promotion Scheme, which was introduced in 2016. And you earlier asked me if I see any challenges with reference to NAPS. It is a scheme that runs well. It allows the establishment to take in apprentices to claim partial reimbursement of the cost of apprenticing, which comes to 1,500 per month for the cost of the stipend, and to 7,500 one-time payment for the cost of basic training. Back to the aspect of challenges, it's been well received by employers and establishments, and we can see and demonstrate that new contracts have picked up demonstrably since the introduction of NAPS, and even more so after the introduction of some easements of the rules which were done in the fall of last year. Okay. And just, look at this current time and period in December of 2020. Last week, we had close to 8,000 new contracts on the portal in optional trades, and there are big companies that are coming forward. I give you an example. This week it was Go Air that announced it's taking in 550 apprentices. Last week it was State Bank of India, SBI, that announced, and you may have heard about this already, that they're taking in 8,500 apprentices. And that's great. And this is growth, and there's a lot of momentum right now. And but there are also challenges, and I would say NAPS is a program that is rather broad, and the benefits are scattered widely. And it is not something that is necessary for the larger and more profitable firms, because for them a subsidy in the order of 1,500 rupees per month doesn't make a large difference. But for SME and MSME, a subsidy even of this small size can make all the difference. So we at NSDC think that in a future version of the NAPS program, it might be more earmarked to the needs of the SME, MSME, and the informal sector.
Okay.
Because there it would make a greater difference.
Yeah. I think that's very nice to hear, because you mentioned a couple of big names also who are hiring apprentices, and we from NSN have been regularly sharing and promoting these openings as soon as we get them from NSDC or other sources. But since you just mentioned MSME, I think that's the main industry in India, as we know. So
yes.
I would like to know more about, and also that we are featuring this conversation with you because the ministry and NSDC is also observing this as the month of apprenticeships. December is the month of apprenticeships. That's what we get to read on social media. So I think it's a very big thing when it comes to advocacy and awareness, Mr. Yan, because we observe that this is something which is really lacking in our efforts, going deeper and deeper and creating awareness. Now, how do you think this aspect can be done in a much more organized way so that we reach more and make it aspirational for youth as well as for the industry, particularly the MSMEs?
Yes, I did mention the rapidly growing numbers, but the starting base is a small one. And if you look at the country the size of India, I mean, even these numbers are small numbers. Though, if you take a calculation, if you contrast the apprenticeship, the active apprenticeship contracts that you have, and just contrast them to the size of the formal sector, then I believe India is doing no worse than any other industrialized countries. But it is the informal sector, and on the border of formal and informal, the many SME that are formal or informal, they need to be approached. And here we have the serious problem of the low social prestige of apprenticeship. And that requires campaigning, that requires a long-term approach to changing cultural orientations. And it cannot, and there are no sure recipes. It can't be done overnight, but it can be done. And if I make a comparison with Germany, where every year about 2/3 to 3/4 of an age cohort go into apprenticeship, then we have a clear example that apprenticeship must not be the second choice, but can very well be the first choice for a young person making the decision for a career. I need to go back a little bit in history.
Yeah, please.
Maybe to understand the difference between the low prestige for apprenticeship in India as to the much higher prestige that is accorded to apprenticeship, not all over Europe, but let's say in continental Europe and Central Europe. And that is because in the, let's say, high Middle Ages, 14th, 15th century, apprenticeship became the preferred mode of training and schooling. There were largely no schools at the time in the Middle Ages, and it served as the instrument, as the tool of transferring the knowledge of one generation to the next. This is how it worked, because a master took in an apprentice, oftentimes his own son, rarely the daughter, or the children of other masters, and trained them in the trade. And this made sure that there was continuity and sustainability of the industries. And when industrialization came in the 19th century, suddenly there was not much need anymore for the skilled and qualified worker. But the industries in the 19th centuries, they required workers that were docile and were doing simple and menial work at a low cost. So apprenticeship effectively got thrown out, definitely in England, but in Germany there was a saving circumstance, namely that the military conscription for young men was waived if they were taken in as apprentices. Okay. So this was a way even for the large industries to secure themselves the resources that they needed for the future by taking them in as an apprentice. They didn't have to go into the military instead. Yeah. So while with industrialization in England and many other English-speaking countries, apprenticeship got thrown out and discontinued, apprenticeship continued to thrive even in large industries in Germany and Central Europe. And so as a conclusion, we may say that the low regard for apprenticeship in India is also an unfortunate but a persistent colonial legacy.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I get it now, the bigger picture.
My point, huh? Yeah?
Yes,
yeah.
I do.
And I think it was recognized by the founders of India. Mahatma Gandhi believed that the practice of an occupation was healthy for the entire society. Right. And I think it was in this spirit of social reform that the 1961 Apprentices Act came in. And interestingly, in the Act, every establishment above a certain size is required to take in apprentices, but still it is largely ignored. Yeah. It's most the paradox of a situation where you have a law on the books, a law of the land, which gets so widely ignored. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But it wouldn't help to come in. It wouldn't help to come in with penalties. I think the approach to incentivize two target groups, yeah, employers and industries on the one hand, and youth and the family on the other hand, incentivize them to take up apprenticeship rather than penalize them for not doing so. Yeah. And that's where I'm coming around in a circle now. That's where NAPS, yeah, is a promising approach. Yeah.
Yes, and the historical perspective that you just gave is simply valuable for, I think, the larger audience also, because we understand Germany, the development of Germany is highly attributed to apprenticeships. I mean, the industrial development, as we all understand, yeah, but the way you presented it has made it, much more richer to understand the cultural and historical significance. Now coming to the role of NSDC, at present, how would you define the role of NSDC in promoting apprenticeships, and what do you foresee in future? I mean, in terms of advocacy, let's say creating awareness, are there any measures coming up, in the near future?
Mm-hmm. NSDC, of course, has been consciously set up as an intermediary organization, as a private sector organization, as a private limited company, so that it can play the role of the intermediary, of the transmission belt, if you wish, between the government and the private sector. Yeah. And that's part of its philosophy and part of its construction. So so NSDC has stakeholders which are upstream and which are downstream. There's the government, of course, and the MSD on the other side. And it is industry on the other side, but there are also some further intermediaries, of course, namely the sector skill councils and the TPAs. Yeah. And in this context, I think NSDC has a facilitating role and it has a regulatory role, but in concurrence with what I had said earlier, it is more important to incentivize and to motivate apprenticeship, and this goes for skilling generally. It is the facilitative role is the more important one. Mm-hmm. So that's one thing. And then, of course, more lately, NSDC also made manages something like the public phase of apprenticeship. And there I'm referring to the portal, apprenticeshipindia.org, which is being developed and which needs to be further developed as a one-stop shop for all stakeholders, companies, employers, apprentices, sector skill councils, TPAs, and so forth.
Yeah. Now, there's one more important aspect of the German dual model. You have already mentioned the German model and its success, but the German dual model has a huge potential in India also, as you may be aware, and it's being followed in, say, small pockets here and there. Do you see a role for, new partnerships coming up through apprenticeships, because it comes very close to apprenticeship model? Do you have any plans of coming up with some, let's say, industry alliances or any innovative things that can, again, I'll go back to my first point of speeding up the apprenticeship adoption in India?
First of all, I think you're quite right, because the German dualVET system is quite similar to apprenticeship in India.
Yeah.
There's of course one difference, and that is the sequential nature of the apprenticeship in India, where you have the basic training first and the on-the-job training that comes in as second. Whereas under the dual system, typically the school part and the on-the-job part are done in parallel mode, or you have blocks that alternate each other. And I think that has advantages because it offers opportunities for the learners to reflect on their learning and to make the better connection between theory and practice. So definitely one would like to see the dual mode to spread more in India. Right. And as I spoke about the difference between optional trades and designated trades, I think it's good to emphasize at this point that under optional trades, there are good opportunities to have dual systems or dual models recognized. And with the Indo-German Chamber of Commerce, we've had last year, we're still allowed to travel and have physical and on-site and face-to-face events. Hopefully we can revise this, of course, now with webinars. But we had these events, and what happened was that the representatives of the Indian affiliates of German and international companies were quite surprised to see the similarity between the dual model and the Indian model, as well as the opportunities and the benefits that they would have if they streamline or mainstream their dual models into optional trades and into NAPs. I think there are opportunities for mainstreaming that need to be explained and explored. And then we can move away from the pockets and from the many pilot projects that are here and there to have a broader acceptance and a broader application of the dual model. And I think the time is right for that. That's one thing. And the other thing is, of course, there's one big difference between the practice in Germany and the practice in India, and that is that in Germany it is mandatory by the German Apprentices Act to have in the company a designated person to act as a mentor or as a trainer, which usually is a senior employee, a more knowledgeable employee, but they got to have a certification and a qualification, which they typically get by taking a 1-week course and a certification, a quick exam and a certification at the end. This trainer certification, I think, is important to lift up the quality of apprenticeship training and to maintain the quality. And in the second phase of the IGVET project, the GIZ Indo-German Vocational Education and Training Project, there is a component to spread and roll out training of trainers, training of mentors after the German model in apprenticeship training. So I also consider this to be very promising. And as this is introduced more widely in India, I think we're going to have a greater concurrence of the traditional Indian system and the dual system for the better of both. Yes.
Okay. I think this is also mentioned in the latest education policy, where there is a lot of promotion for apprenticeships, even from the school level. So that's one of the important aspects of the policy. So let's hope that also gets implemented in future, where the younger students also get industry exposure. And like you said earlier, the social angle, the cultural aspects of promoting apprenticeship are very challenging in India, even in other countries. But here it has so many, the stigma attached to a few job roles and things like that. So I think the policy is also trying to address, and the future looks quite bright, I would say, for the younger generation, to go through these trainings. Is there anything else, Mr. Yan, that you would like to mention or discuss?
Interestingly, this morning I had a conversation with a gentleman who took a marketing perspective to the promotion of apprenticeship, which is something we as educationalists do not always do. And, and he framed it like this: the government is the producer or the manufacturer of the product, the NSDC is the wholesaler, and then you have the sector skill council and the TPAs, who are the retailers. And he also said apprenticeship is not a pull product, it's a push product.
Yes.
Yeah, where the salesperson needs to explain, proactively needs to explain the benefits of using that that product. And so, what are the benefits? This is what I want to get at. And let's say in three bullet points. The benefits to the industry, because the bait needs to be tasteful for the fish, right?
Yeah.
There's a flexibility advantage. Apprenticeship under optional trades can be structured according to company and industry needs as regards to the time and the content and the structure. There's a cost advantage because the government of India contributes through NSDC and NAPS, which for some corporates is not much, but for the small ones, it is really a difference that makes or breaks it. And then there is a management advantage, because also there is something that is unique to India. You have the institution of the third-party aggregators that can help those corporates who are not accustomed to apprenticing to take up the little, I must say, but nonetheless existing administrative burden of apprenticing.
Yeah.
So that's those three benefits, if I'm allowed in closing to emphasize in 3 bullet points, I think are important, and these have to be on the mind of all those establishments that are already aware of apprenticeship, but who need to be pushed from awareness to action.
Right.
Yeah, and that seems to be the case for so many of them.
Right. Yeah, I think that was a perfect closure when you mentioned the push model. I think that's what is currently happening, and the time, cost, and management, the 3 very important aspects, the benefits, the way you have described it. We will definitely try to reiterate and convey your message through our website and our newsletter and various other means. So thanks a lot for talking to me today, Mr. Yan. This was a very learningful chat I had with you to know more about apprenticeships and your perspective. So thanks again for being with us. I look forward to be in touch with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This has been a challenging and interesting conversation.